So thanks everyone for joining us. Today we're going to talk a little more about reopening. We have representation from Lyric Stage, the Nora at Central Square Theater, and New Rep. Thank you all for joining us. So excited to hear people sort of share their plans. And what I will say is, if there's anybody else on here who at any time wants to sort of share, this is what we're thinking, this is what we're looking at. I think obstacles, challenges, questions right now are the things that are helpful for everybody at like all levels, right? They're just, there's a lot of stuff. We still don't know what we don't know, and we're finding out bits and pieces every day. So this sort of group information dump, I think, is helpful for folks. We will have one more regular meeting, fingers crossed if I can get all of our speakers lined up next Tuesday. And then we're going to start to move to an every other week for these calls sort of thing, right? Like we've been saying it since March. Oh, we're all zoomed out, we're on 1 million calls. And I want to help make space for all of the other conversations that have to happen and not make this feel like a thing that you have to do. But also my hope is that in making space for all of those other conversations, we're all bringing some of that information back here and back to the community and sharing with all the sort of different levels, the schools and universities, the small and fringe, the mid-size and large, and the sort of, I think we have some independent and freelance folks who also sit in on this call who are also producing and trying to figure out what their next steps are. So that is it. That is my ask of you from here out. As you are having other conversations, if you think there's something that's useful for the larger community, let me know, tap your friends, be like, you should join in on this call. That's it, plug over. All right, friends, turn on your AC, let's get started. I would love to start with my good friend and colleague, Courtney O'Connor, over at the Lyric Stage to talk a little bit about what their plans are. And I mean, I want to preface this with saying, like, Courtney, you and I have talked a lot about, like, and we've all talked about this, so no tea, no shade, like the pivot. We've got like plans for this, but we also don't know what the governor is going to say. So we are ready to move into this other thing at the drop of a hat. So if you would give us sort of a rundown of maybe plan A.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, and you know, point in fact, plan A today is different than what plan A was a week ago, right? Like we just sort of had to make a pivot. So we hope to be able to open in the fall. We have several factors that we think that we've identified as sort of what's allowing us to think this way. And some of them come down to sheer dumb luck. I mean, we by chance replaced our HVAC system 4 years ago. We've got pardon my French, we've got a kick-ass HVAC system. Like, and that's just dumb luck that it was 4 years ago, that it's current, and that when we did it, we got a good one. So our HVAC system turns the air completely over in our space 8 to 15 times an hour, which is really good. So we have that. The physical layout of the theater, the way it's sort of, excuse me, like broken up into wedges. I think of it as the Trivial Pursuit wedges. Like that actually helps us have a little bit of distancing built in ways that some other spaces might not be able to automatically have. And then I think the other two big things is that we are fortunate enough to be both in control of our space and in control of our own rehearsal hall. And that's making a huge difference for us in what we're looking at. So plan A, as of the moment, is that we will open in early October. And up till last week, we thought we were going to try and open in early September. And what's funny is, you know, I was talking with an actor who's working with us, and he was like, you know, well, was it equity? Was it the state? Why did you push back? And I was like, it was because I didn't feel we had enough time, because we are pivoting so much and we are changing so much. We're looking at opening with a one-person show that the actor just got the script to last week. And so the idea of him learning 55 pages of dialogue between now and early September felt daunting and unfair. So we are hoping to open in October. We have completely rejiggered our season from what we had announced, and we are looking at a season of 7 shows, mostly 1- and 2-person pieces. We have one 4-person show that I'm crossing my fingers I can get in, I've already thought of how I can do it with no one being anywhere near each other. So, you know, that's a dream that come March, we'll be able to do that. But we're, like Dawn said, everything we're doing is about the pivot. All of the decisions that we are making, and some of them are heartbreaking. We are essentially having one set for the season that will be adjusted for each show. But that's going to allow us, if we need to close down and reopen on a new show, or if we need to run 2 shows in rep because we had to close one down, or if we have to just make a huge jump 3 months, we don't have to wait for a new set to be built. We don't have to wait for a new set to be installed. We don't have to make sure that it works. We've already got it. And each set will have a little bit of adjustment made to it. But, you know, the overall sort of centralized scenic piece will be the same. And we're scaling back on lighting designers for the same reason. We're going to have 2 lighting designers sort of splitting the season between them, not necessarily alternating every other show, but splitting the season. And they'll have a rep plot that they're working from, and then they can add to it. But again, it allows us that if we need to run 2 in rep, if we need to flip, we can. And, you know, we've purposely picked shows that don't have intermissions until our first show scheduled with an intermission is April, May of next year. And so, you know, this is the thing, right? We've made all of these choices. We've done all of this, and we still don't know. And this is where we just sit there and we go, the best thing we can do is try. We have to believe that if the arts are essential, we want to be back and we want to be presenting. We don't want to do it if we can't be safe. We don't want to do it if we can't do it following rules and regulations that have been set forth for us and will continue to come out. And so we have our application in with equity. We have information sent to SDC. We're sending, you know, plans to the state, plans to the city, and trying to get whatever feedback. And we know that we're on a waiting game. And so this is, you know, the pivot and the plan for today, but it is by no means the final one. It is by no means where we will end up. I think the one thing that we know is that things will constantly change this year. And our job is to position ourselves to best be ready to respond to them when they do.
So in terms of the waiting game, right, I guess, and I don't know if this is a fair question, but how long do you wait, right? My understanding, like loose understanding, equity, like a lot of folks over there are on furlough. So you have to, like, it's going to be a longer process. I imagine that with the state and the city, anything that is being sent to them, right, they've got tons of things coming in. So how long do you wait before you pivot on your own again?
It's a great question. I don't fully know the answer to it, right? Because I think that we're going to wait and see. Equity, we're having conversations with them. There is a back and forth, but you're right. They have furloughed a lot of their staff, and you know, their staff is working so hard right now to try and deal with every theater, right? I mean, and every theater is in a different state. It's in different areas where infection rates are different. Mm-hmm. And so I really am appreciative of the work that these entities are putting in. And we've been lucky, and they've been very responsive to us. That being said, I have no idea when we will hear an answer from them, right? It's been a conversation back and forth. They'll ask us a question, and they have told us, if anybody is planning on sending anything in, that they are not doing sort of approvals of full seasons. They're approving a show at a time. So all the information that we've sent in is for our first 2 shows, which actually just had a change to it. So now we're going to have to readjust what we've sent to them for that, right? But we're focused on that first show right now, saying, can we at least get, you know, permission from that? And I should also clarify the city and the state, I mean, I don't know about the Commonwealth, but the city has said they are not going to approve or reject plans. We've just sort of sent some things to the Mayor's Arts and Culture office to sort of say, does this look like we're on the right track? Do you have any feedback for us that you'd like us to be thinking of? But they've been very clear that they are not, or at least when we last spoke to them, that they were not planning on approving. So I don't know when we pivot. I know, you know, as of right now, in the Commonwealth, we don't have permission to open. Indoor theaters don't have permission to open. And Julianne Boyd is in rehearsals out in the Berkshires. That is bold. I don't know if I feel that comfortable. So for me, I think personally the date is a week or two before the first rehearsal. But on the other hand, I say that now, and who knows, right? Like, ask me in a week and I might have a different answer. Ask me in 10 minutes and I might have a different answer.
Mm-hmm. Are you comfortable or willing to go into plan B? Like what does that look like, or any part of it that you might be willing to talk about? If not, no worries, but.
No, I mean, it's actually, we don't have plan B. Like, and I don't mean that like we're not thinking that way, everything's going to be great,
Right.
but it's that we've got like 18 different thoughts and plans, and we're really trying to just go, what are the given circumstances at this moment, and react.
Oh, nice callback.
You know what I mean? So it's like we've got multiple possibilities, but I mean, there is the old saying, if you want to make God laugh, make plans, and that has been this spring, right? Like, every time I go, this is it, I've got it, it changes the next day, or sometimes in the next hour, right? So, I mean, I've got like 18 different variations of what could happen. I have no idea what we're going to do, and we're just going to see whatever gets put in front of us next, whatever the next set of given circumstances are, we will pivot and adjust then.
I want to thank you for coming back to all of my college training, given circumstances. I feel like I'm going to use that for, like, what are the given circumstances?
It's true.
Plan for that. I love it. All right, friends, I don't see anything in the chat. Courtney, if you'd stay on as long as you can. Friends, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. I am going to move on to Michael Bobbitt over at New Rep. Hello, friend.
Hello, I can't see myself yet. Oh, I'm still on. Hi, everyone. How are you?
Doing great.
Good. My two least favorite words are scenario plans and pivoting. I hate those words. I hate them.
Sorry, because I'm going to say them all day long for the next year, right? That's like where we are.
Yeah, no, it's and I keep saying that no one trains you for pandemic planning and race equity work in artistic director schools. So we're all kind of like learning and making up as we go along, right? So do you want me to just talk about what we're thinking about in planning?
Yeah, I think, right, I get same scenario. What's your reopening plan? What is it today?
So there are many balls up in the air that we are considering. Some we are moving forward with. Similar to Courtney, we are looking at a unit set and a unit light plot that will be adjusted and refocused per show. We are curating a list of 1-man, 2-man, and 3-man shows. And what I'm going to do is produce them like Broadway does, which is not announce the opening until I know when the opening's going to be, and not hire artists until I absolutely know when I'm going to be able to produce the show, and then run it and run it and run it until it starts declining in ticket sales, and then start working on the next show. And I think we'll just do that until the world reopens normally. What's not similar is that we do not control our theater and our rehearsal space. We are leasing it from the Mosesian Center for the Arts, and we're in a big battle to renegotiate those contracts right now. So that is part of what is holding us back. But it's a large theater, it's 340-seat theater, so even at a social distanced capacity, we should be able to get anywhere from 50 to 75 tickets in there. We're working with the board on figuring out how to budget for this season. So we have chosen to budget for operational costs to be covered by fundraising, and that each show will be approved as an off-budget item, meaning that those shows will have to cover their expense. So whatever I produce has to cover its own expense, and then operations will be covered by fundraising. It feels a little bit safer to do that, but it does put a lot of pressure on fundraising. In addition to that, we are curating 2 historic interactive theatrical walking tours in the city of Watertown. One will be about a character and centering Black stories in Watertown, and one will center Indigenous people stories in Watertown. That's a partnership with the Watertown Historic Society and the Watertown Public Library. We're still figuring out all the ins, ends, and buts about that, but we're hiring 2 actors and 2 directors and 2 playwrights. Very exciting. We're also curating, soon you'll hear about this, we're curating a New Rep After Dark series. So on Wednesdays, once or twice a month, we're going to be sending out an RFP for any and all kinds of performers, drag artists, magicians, stupid pet tricks, singers, actors, whoever wants to like perform at late night performance for about 45 minutes. We'll pay you for that, and we'll send it out to our patron base to charge them. One of the things we were intentional about was when the world sort of shut down to not rush and come up with digital programming, to really take our time to figure out what we wanted to do, and specifically to figure out what we wanted to do that could last beyond the pandemic. That we were not looking at a stopgap, we were looking at new digital programming that we can do again and again and again. So one of the things we're doing, we're in the beta testing period, and Roz is one of our fantastic dramaturgs who's beta testing it. But we were beta testing a script reading book club. We sent out scripts to a small group of people every 2 weeks. They got to read the play and then have a dramaturg curated conversation with the playwright. So we had Aaron Posner, we had Karen Zacharias, we had Lauren Gunderson, and we had Joe Calarco. That was in a Zoom room. Now we're opening it up to webinar format to get more people in. So the last session we had Jacqueline Lawton, and then tomorrow we have Damon Chua, and Roz is going to be curating that conversation. Once we get to that period and do a couple of surveys, we're going to open it up to our whole patron base. This is going to be free. What I like about that is that I'm a new work guy. I've commissioned over 50 new works in my career, and I want to do more at New Rep. But this is a chance for me to train my audiences to love the content of the show versus the title. So I'm super excited about that. Additionally, I am hosting a series on Sundays called In the Wings Artist Salon, where I'm having conversations with great leaders. Some of you are here on this Zoom. That's going to go down to once a month. But those are great conversations, and our social media platform has just skyrocketed because of those. And then the last thing we're thinking about is a Zoom play series. And the plan is that we're going to have conversations with sort of advanced technology people like 3D sound people and animators and projectionists and lighting designers to figure out what we need to do to make Zoom sort of better. And one of the plans is that we're going to buy 3D cameras so that we're not relying on actors, laptops, and phones. We're going to buy Wi-Fi extenders so we have some stability, a laptop that's just used for these shows. And then once we figure out what that is and what we can offer the playwright will work directly with the director and the actor, come up with the play using Zoom as a platform and using what they have in their home. So that's safe. And then and those will hopefully be dramatic shows. And the plan for that is that when you show up on this website, you will be introduced to some sort of house manager or concierge that will explain the night for you. You'll get to go to play A or play B. And then at intermission, you're going to meet a virtual bartender or a busker for 15 minutes. And then you'll go to the second play. And hopefully we can curate those once a month or once every other month. We shall see. But that's it for the time being. I still hope I can get my holiday production of Spelling Bee up and running, but who knows? The other thing we're doing, instead of changing up the whole season and moving the whole season, we're taking each show and moving it. So we were supposed to open Angels in America this fall. We've just moved Angels in America to next fall. So that subscription season stays intact. New Rep is in the process of eliminating our subscription packet. We have sold too many right now to do it now. So we are going to shift that to a more equitable, less racist membership model, like a Netflix model. So if Spelling Bee can't open this holiday, we'll move Spelling Bee to next holiday. So again, that subscription season stays intact. And that's the plan. And the other big part of operations is that I am, for the last year, my anniversary is in 9 days, everybody, 10 days, whatever it is, 1 year anniversary. This year, thank you. This year has been about cleaning up operations, finance specifically, and focusing on board governance. Next year, our big project is really building our development department. We just hired 2 new people. And so we're building systems and processes for that. And hopefully we'll go through our strategic planning session. But my job this year is also now starting to make inroads with local legislation. There have been some conversations that we've been having about what I think is not enough advocacy from arts leadership on a legislative level. When I look at the amount of money that the arts brings to the state and how much money we get back from the state, I think that there's a gap. And so I hope you guys will all start including in your annual plan, really cultivating relationships with your town and city politicians, your county politicians, and your state politicians, so that we can start getting more money collectively. And then really using our patron base and our board members to really start advocating for what we need. I think it's interesting to me that the reopening of churches and movie theaters happened before theaters, and especially churches, because those seem like theaters to me. So that's part of my annual plan, to really start building those relationships.
One of the things that really sort of resonates with me, and it's a thing that we have all been hearing, right? How are we taking this time to rethink our models? How are we taking this time? Like, we shouldn't come out the same, we should come out better, we should come out changed. And just listening to everything that you said, it feels like you were taking some steps to really make that happen. I think one of the things I'm really, really interested in, and I don't know if this is like a further conversation or what, but this idea of, okay, we're going to do the sort of like 1-person show, we're going to put it up when we know we can, and we're going to let it run until it sort of peters out, and I'm not announcing the next thing until we know we're going to do it, right? I think you and I have had these conversations about, right, like, how am I changing the model? How do we change how people are able to come to theater, can afford theater, all of that, like making it anti-racist. And it feels like, right, you are making such great use of this downtime right now.
Yeah. I have a problem with season planning. I've always had it in my 15 years of producing, that it's just, I think, difficult. It's difficult to sort of capitalize on good work. When you open a show, especially if you have a subscription model, you can, if it's a great show, you can extend it for maybe a week, maybe 2. If you do 2 or more, you're starting to put more resources in opening the next show. And conversely, if you have a terrible show that's not doing well, you can't close it early because subscribers have bought tickets in the last couple of weeks of the run. So that is a problem. And I think going to some sort of season slate that you announce, but not announcing the opening until about a month out, to me makes a lot more sense. And I've gone on my soapbox about subscriptions and how racist they are and how much they don't really work financially. And I'm happy to talk with anyone that wants to hear more about that. But that whole model too, I think is, we have learned that subscriptions are fickle. Right now, all the money we got from our subscription renewal campaign is fickle because there's a pandemic. But this could happen any year. There could be a fire in your theater or a strike or anything like that. So getting rid of those models, I think, are good. And I'm proud of New Rep because we've been really looking at inequities on the operations side and race on the operations side and not just programmatic. I think this industry does a great job at looking at programs. It can always get better, but I think that we are overrun with community engagement and those kinds of programs. And we've done a good job of making sure there are more brown voices on stage and behind the scenes. We have a long way to go with that. But we're starting to look at things like seating, like, we're going to go to general admission seating, because why are we giving our subscribers who have more better, leaving the brown and black and poor and young people sitting in the back and the sides? And then when our subscribers come to the theater, we stand on stage and we say, you're our favorite patron. We like you much more than we like the people that can't be subscribers, right? So getting rid of those kinds of seats. Dawn, that's what we do though, right?
No, I know. And I have been a house manager in those spaces and said that. And I'm like, oh, that sounds gross.
Yeah.
When you say it like that, it sounds,
We do. So we want to do that. We are also the membership model. I am going to be working with a bunch of MBAs and entrepreneurs to kind of rethink how budgeting works, because that's another thing I think is still steeped in supremacy, and most of us do budgeting based on trends from previous years. But if you're a predominantly white organization, which I think you should not be allowed to be predominantly white anymore, but if you are basing your trends on predominantly white people. So budgeting to me, I think, keeps us in those modes. And the other big change we're making is all of our donors will now get the same benefits. So no matter if you've given $25 or $25,000, you get the same benefits. Because again, I don't want to reward people that have much because of privilege with more. And my $25 is as a big gesture for someone else's $2,500 or $25,000. So I'm so excited about all these kinds of things. I am like zeroed in and trying to find every single thing that we can do to break away that. I'm also now on this big trip about boards and how I think boards are at the root of all evil when it comes to racism. But those are hard conversations to have. But we need to change the power dynamic and need to really rethink how boards are meant to support the vision of the organization and not run the company. Anyway, more to come.
Thank you so much for that. Yeah, I'm like, sorry, I'm in my head and I'm in my feelings. I'm gonna stop. Lee, hello, my good friend. Would love to hear about the Nora. And I'm also wondering, I did not mention this before, but I don't know if there's any chance you might talk about the Starlight space and plans for that.
It's all the same thing.
Awesome.
So for those of you who don't know, Central Square Theater is really two companies, the Nora and Underground Railway, which Deborah Wise is the artistic director of that. And so we work under Central Square Theater, which is the building that we have in Central Square, and sort of this idea of collaboration. And we've been fortunate in that Central Square in Cambridge, pre-COVID, was already creating a outdoor space for the community. And with COVID, they jumped up that timeline, and it's now going to be built in the parking lot behind the H Mart, which is in Central Square along Mass Ave. And Central Square Theater is one of the three sort of anchor cultural institutions that have been part of that planning. So come August 15th-ish, we'll have an outdoor space that we can utilize. And so we're planning to program that. So it's not just Central Square Theater, it's also Boston Improv, hey Margaret Ann, wherever you are, and the Dance Complex are the three cultural institutions. And then the space itself will get opened up to churches, to farmers markets, to ancillary programming, sort of however the community wants to, it's been fast. So it's whatever we can sort of throw together for this first time. And if it seems like it's a positive thing for the community, it will actually be brought back again, whether we're in COVID or not. So it's an exciting step forward for the whole Central Square Cambridge community. We have sort of three major pushes for our programming for that. So first of all, the space is, right now it's entirely built to follow all the safety precautions. I think it's sitting about 150, and that's with social distancing. It's got a very strict, it will be ticketless. Our front of house will be running all the events, so there'll be consistency in masks and hand sanitizer and how you get in, and temperature taking, and all the safety precautions that I think we're probably all aware of. So we're being very clear and consistent with how it wants to run as safely as possible. So we're responsible for several chunks of programming. One is going to be our Act Up and Vote campaign, which will be in October, right before the election. One will be the front porch, doing a week of programming, completely sort of separate from us, but into our sort of programming time. And then we are at the moment curating a series of one and two person shows to fill up the rest of our time. We have a proposal into equity. It's pending right now. I know Kathy Carr-Kelly, our executive director, is, yay, yes, thanks, Don, is in conversation with equity at the moment, trying to hammer out the last few details. And I'm going back to something Courtney said early on. It's my understanding, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think equity is looking at contracting, not in the order they get them, but in the order in which places are trying to open. So they're looking at ours right now and are in final conversations because we're opening soon, as opposed to, I think, Courtney, you're still in conversation because your opening is a little bit later in the year.
Yeah, that's how I understand it as well.
Yeah. And what they're doing in the Berkshires, I don't know. Bold move down there. So we're excited about that because it's doing a couple things. One, it's obviously keeping our name out there, but it's allowing us to go into the community in a way that we haven't before. I mean, we have been through thick and thin and through hard times and good. You know, I think we've fallen into the trap of expecting the community to come to us. And we've been trying to figure out a way to break that habit, that mold. And this is actually the first real way we've found for us to go into the community, to bring stuff to go out there. And not even Central Square Theater produced. I mean, we're essentially sponsoring or sort of presenting different kinds of theater and or cabaret from other. In fact, we're partnering with Michael on a show, and so I'm actually excited about that as a way to increase our collaboration, not just with partners around the region, but going into the community in a way that we haven't been able to do so before. Currently, the hope would be that the city comes up with funds to make the tickets free. We're not quite there yet. I know that there is still some financial maneuverings going on. And like everything else, it's a little bit like we're moving ahead as if this is going to happen, and we're dealing with the challenges that pop up daily as they come along. So it's not quite, but almost, you know, if you build it, they will come sort of faith-based programming. And that space will take us through October. Rehearsals, so for example, we're not producing, but anybody who needs to rehearse, we have to rehearse outdoors. We're not allowing people into our space to rehearse unless we get equity approval, which we're not counting on. So we're gonna be providing sort of a tent in our courtyard so that there's at least shade, and we'll be working with the individual artists on sort of figure out what they need and when they need it, and if they need to rehearse, if they need to rehearse in person, how can we facilitate that? If they can rehearse via Zoom or online, you know, great. So those are things that are going to just keep rolling along as we get closer and closer to actually programming different artists. And our Act Up and Vote, which honestly, I think they're doing Zoom right now, and we'll eventually do some outdoor in-person rehearsals. After that, I know that we will be going remote again through at least the end of the year. Our goal is to open a 2-person show in January-ish, in that time slot. We have 2 Lauren Gunderson plays scheduled back to back because of the previous pushback. So we've created a Women in Science festival around those 2 shows. And whether we get to produce or not in person, we still are committed to doing that Women in Science festival remotely if we have to, because it's part of what we do, and we're committed to moving that part of our mission forward. What happens in the fall, we've just started to talk about, and we're realizing some things. Like I personally am less and less a fan of the Zoom play. We're doing the Watsons right now, which is a full-length play, but we've broken it up into 4 parts so that each section is roughly 35 minutes to sort of help combat Zoom fatigue. What we do in the fall is probably going to be less sort of a Zoom play and more conversations we're having with the community or walking tours in the Cambridge area, such as Michael talked about. We just had a really great conversation with Brian Core, one of our board members, who wrote a couple essays, Black Lives Matter, why does my Black life matter? He's a Black male on our board, and that garnered a lot of interest from our sort of community. And I think we want to follow up with those kinds of conversations about anti-racism, and how it was so funny because somebody in the chat during that sort of wanted some definitions about some of the terms, like what is an ally, what does this phrase mean? So we were a little bit like, wow, is that a whole conversation just to sort of deconstruct what some of this, some of this verbiage is that we toss around because like we're in it, but who does a man on the street really understand? So that was sort of a surprise. And we're like, food for thought. How should we tackle this? So those conversations will continue to happen as part of our sort of external anti-racism work. I think, and then there is a plan B if we can't open in January. As a betting person, I'm like 70-30, maybe not. I live in hope. Then I think the plan is to move the 2 science plays into the next season, and we would still keep our last 2 plays, or what are our last 2 plays? We would still try to keep Angels in America, parts 1 and 2, which is our sort of May, June, July slot, hanging on to that until we absolutely know that we can't do it. And then we would program into the summer so that our season would really look more like that May through the summer with some programming, probably back to Starlight, which will be open again. And then however we adjust into the following season. So the notion of seasons right now is really being challenged, whether you're looking at it from an anti-racist or just fiscal point of view, or just because of COVID. So there's an opportunity there, I think. I find it really, I have a phrase, and those of you who know me, you've heard me say this, change only happens when somebody's in pain or hugely genius inspired, but mostly when somebody's in pain. So we as a nation, and certainly as a field, are in tremendous pain right now. And it's allowing for disruption, it's allowing for dismantling, it's allowing for looking at all the things that we've taken for granted or have been habituated, which I'm excited about. Although I am bereft that it's coming out of such tragic consequence of this pandemic and our national lack of leadership. And that's all I'll say on that. So we're in that position of, we are looking at things internally, both from a operational point of view. We're not wholesale changing our programming. We're just sort of keeping an eye on what's possible. And probably in the fall, we'll take a real hard look at what Plan C might be when we all have new, different, updated information. I think that's sort of it. That's where we are. That's where we are right now.
Thank you. I think things that really resonate me, that idea of the notion of seasons changing, what does that look like, right? It sounds like everybody's sort of wrestling with this idea of the subscription model, and is this the time to sort of reconfigure what that is? I don't know if you would have the answer to this, Lee, but do you get the sense that there is any way, shape, or form that that outdoor space might live on longer than October? Right,
No.
I hear it's coming back, but
Yeah, no, we have permits from the city of Cambridge for, I think it's 180 days, which is basically like mid-August to mid-October. So this go round, it will end, and unless the powers that be do something different, it will end in mid-October. Which actually is not, I don't think that's a bad thing. I mean, again, this is like a lot of things right now. It's a big experiment. So to keep it sort of discrete and finite will tell us a lot about, one, operationally how it's going to work, the kind of support it gets from the community, the kind of resources and capacity it's going to take fiscally from not only the city of Cambridge, but you know, fundraising from the business leaders, and perhaps individual fundraising from the different artistic entities. So we're going to come out of the 180 days with a lot of data. And I think that's okay. I think it's okay to say, this is what it is. Here's what we know. Here's how we can make it better. And perhaps next year extend it or open it earlier, or, you know, whatever that wants to look like. Also, you know, all that, like there's scaffolding. There's like 2-story tall scaffolding with like these sort of mural things in place, so that the theater itself is like, you can't, like somebody in the building across the street can't watch the performance, right? So it's and there's security measures to it. So so how all of that works, and so not just population flow, but the building of it. And is anyone from Shakespeare Com on here, because we're borrowing their stage? Thank you. You know, and so the capacity for it is also sort of in the data mix. Like, what do we learn? What can we keep? What do we have to rethink?
right. So the finite time gives you a chance to, sort of post-more, regroup, and come back next season with something else.
Exactly.
So then I have, sorry, I'm not seeing a lot of questions in the chat. I have a question to anybody who is comfortable answering this. I think with the sort of restrictions in terms of how many people we can have in spaces, seating wise, right? What are the financial implications of that? Like, is it, I don't know if the question is how sustainable is it, how reasonable is it, but right, I think right now we're looking at 40% capacity for like any house, thinking about what that actually looks like, putting up a show, understanding the pivot to like 1 and 2 person shows, cutting down on cost, one set, right, rep plot, but like financially, what's the sort of medium term proposition we're looking at here? How long could you possibly do it?
I don't know how long we could possibly do it. It is certainly not something that is sustainable indefinitely. But I think that at least for us, as a means of coming back, as a means of reopening, it is sustainable for a bit. But I don't think that, I don't know. I mean, I think that these are the tough questions of how long can you run at 40%? It does change what kinds of shows you can do, right? The decision to go to one set was for the flexibility, was for the opportunities that it would allow us, but there is no denying that there is cost savings attached to it. That is part of, so it's all this sort of giant puzzle of what's making it possible to look at these different structures, to look at these different models. And I think that we're gonna have to see how it goes. We're going to have to see how long it is sustainable, and then chances are we'll be in a completely different set of circumstances and have to rethink what we're doing again. And, you know, I mean, I think like everybody else, it is a time where we're re-looking at all of our models and all of our ways of operating and thinking. So what holds for this year may not be what holds for next year, may not be what holds for 6 months from now.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on that because there's a question in the chat from Jerry about, the audience. So we can open, yay, but will audiences come? And in the chat, there are a couple comments about how there are surveys being done right now to gauge that. And right now, we're just talking about this morning, right now, for our cohort at Central Square Theater, people are less than comfortable coming back to the theater anytime soon. That doesn't mean there aren't the theater fans out there who are diehard, come back as soon as the doors open. But I think we're, along with trying to navigate the rules for equity and the rules for the state opening, it's also what's our messaging to our patrons and will they feel safe coming back? So I know that Kathy Clark-Kelly is our executive director, like she has the numbers, and Nick Peterson, who's our marketing guy, is also our data guy. Like we're like a big data organization, and they're sort of like looking at all of that right now, and we'll be taking that information and data and looking ahead. There's also, so I'm sort of answering this question in a sort of circumferably, because there's also the question of at what point does anybody, any theater company out there just say, and we know some national companies have done that, just say, we're now just going to hibernate for a while. So in order to preserve the company itself, and or because we don't want to, bastardize our mission and our view of what live theater is, do we just hibernate until circumstances change? Which I think is a legitimate. The answer to that is, if the answer to that is yes, that's a legitimate way to go. And it's something I know we at Central Square Theater haven't really started to talk about yet. Every now and then I'll sort of go, well, what is the worst case scenario and what does that look like? And for a while it was, worst case scenario was to shut down. But now worst case scenario, which might be hibernation, it doesn't necessarily mean we close. It means that we sort of hibernate until we can regroup. There's challenges to that. I am not advocating that. I'm just saying, as in the long run, that's a legitimate answer for different organizations. And this goes back to, we don't know what we don't know, right? We don't know what things are going to look like in November. We don't know what they're going to look like in January. We don't know what the virus is going to do. We don't know what, right now Massachusetts is holding its numbers down. Yay, Massachusetts. We don't know what the election's going to hold, right? So depending on who gets elected in November, it's a whole other set of circumstances that we have no clue right now what that means to us. So, we definitely, so going back to the question, we definitely are always looking at our capacity. And right now, our projections take us through the end of this season with our plan A, which is to come back maybe in January with a 2-person show and sort of try to finish out the rest of the season. When and if that doesn't become feasible, we'll be looking at projections again, and that will tell us the next step. So we're looking at our long-term survival, but we're only doing it, well, not only doing it, we're definitely taking it in steps, right? I sort of liken it to like you pull the Band-Aid, you're the kind of company that pulls the Band-Aid off, and that's the decision, or we're the kind of that we're like peeling the Band-Aid off a little bit at a time, which frankly can be frustrating in some ways, but we also are not quite ready to say we're done enough to go into hibernation. There's still that faith, that hope, that belief in live theater and what we do at our theater company that keeps us going at the moment.
Yeah. John. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I just wanted to jump really quickly, and then Michael, I'll turn it over to you, absolutely. I just want to say one thing, which is, Dawn, you've heard me say this, you and I have had this conversation, that I think this is such a difficult time for every company, and every company has to make the decisions that are right for them, and what's right for one company is not automatically what's right for the next in terms of hibernating or furloughs or whatever. And I just, I send all support and admiration for everyone making the different decisions. And I really do feel like it's our job right now to support each other and not, like I don't look at it. I'm reading here that Improv Boston has hibernating. So it's like, I don't look at them and go, oh, they're hibernating, but we're not. What's wrong? Like everybody's in different circumstances. And the more we can support each company in their individual decisions, I think the stronger we'll all be.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to say is that I guess I would argue that the arts are not sustainable even without a pandemic. Like our problem is not that we overspend. Like you can't do a 7-person play with 6 people. You can't do a string quartet with 2 people, right? The problem is we're underfunded. And so in this time where we can like really think about correcting some of the problems that we have, I think that's why I say start building relationships with your politics, because funding is political. One of your best tactics for coming back strong is to de-racify your organizations. I just made that word up. Let's trend it, everyone. Build an anti-racist organization, because there are so many people that you have not been allowing in your theater because of unintended structures and systems and racism that you have. So build an anti-racist structure, because brown and black people will start showing up when that happens. And then instead of like putting band-aids on these financial models that we have been complaining about since the 1950s, throw them out and start all over. Because maybe there is some sustainable way in there. And then the other thing I would say is let's work together. Like I'm a little afraid that if I do general admission seating, my patrons come to my theater and then they go to your theaters and it's not general admission, then they're not going to support my general admission thing. So let's see how we can work together to like build a new culture and correct the wrongs. I even think this fight about streaming to me is a ridiculous fight, because the idea that 100,000 people can see the play I produce versus the 5,000, to me, like, I don't see the argument. Everyone had a front row seat at Hamilton, not just the rich people that could afford a $2,000 ticket. It's not, people still had a visceral experience. The reason why I do theater is because I was sitting in my living room and I saw musical theater on TV. So you can have a visceral theatrical experience without being in the building. So all of those things that make our organizations inaccessible are the kinds, and not sustainable, are the things we have to like reinvent. Just we're all smart, we're all creative. That's what we do best. We're creative. We can create new things.
Absolutely, and we should be tackling these questions again, however they work within our particular theater companies. Mm-hmm. So hibernation doesn't mean like quitting, right? So don't in any way think hibernation just means, just like from a financial point of view, you have to make some hard decisions. It doesn't mean that we don't still, as artists and artistic leaders, don't go out there and attempt to change our field in the way that we want to see it change. The two don't go hand in hand at all. And so, yeah, I totally agree with Michael. Now, when our data guy looks at our subscription series and taking in this, like what Michael does and the different models that are happening right now, we'll end up making these decisions that seem right for us. But it's not as if we're not asking the questions and examining our structures.
Agreed.
Right, agreed. Friends, I just want to, so our good friend Eva at the Boston Foundation had to drop off, but there's just a point that Josh made in here that I want to lift up, because it's one of the things that kind of hurts my heart. But Josh says, we can't operate at 40% capacity with restrictions and make money. So we're furloughed until it's actually possible to come back. By not paying staff, we can pay rent for a much longer time. That idea of having to make the decision between paying rent and paying human beings to do the work is heartbreaking to me. And I don't know, there's something in the messaging of that, of like, these are the decisions also that we are making, right? The things that make us go into hibernation. But to Lee's point, to both Courtney and Michael's point, the idea that hibernation doesn't mean that we are dormant, doesn't mean that we are stagnant, like we're still doing work at that time, but it allows us to think about how we're coming back. But part of why we have to do this is because there are these other financial implications that are not that are not, we are not finding relief for, right?
And that goes back to something Michael said earlier, which was, also taking the time right now to really start advocating for increased funding for the arts. So not just for emergency funding that's going to get us through this time, but in the long run, a systemic change in the way the state looks at the arts and funds the arts. So that's a longer term and completely necessary step that we have to make. And by we, I mean the artistic leaders in this group and anybody who's not here, right? We have to be proactive in that way. So that's part of the work too, right? That's got nothing to do with whether or not I can keep the doors at Central Square Theater open or how successful Starlight is. That has to do with sustaining the arts in Massachusetts. And there will be messaging coming out soon about how we all need to step up and be part of that effort.
Excellent. My friends, we are 1 minute to 12. This was a great conversation to come back to. I cannot thank you all enough for your time. I cannot thank you all enough for your sense of humor, right? And patience, and Courtney, as you have said, grace, how we have all sort of gone through this. We're all gonna figure it out, right? Because we have to, and that's what we do. We're creatives. And I could not be more thrilled to do this with all of you. Thank you so much.